installment. We have a treat for you today. Today we're going to be discussing the school to prison pipeline, okay? And so we're going to talk a little bit about just a quick roadmap. Well, before I dive into that, my name is Genghis Shakhan. Let me do a quick introduction. My name is Genghis Shakhan. I'm the managing attorney at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. We are a boutique law firm consisting of two attorneys, myself, as well as my partner, attorney Chelsea Wilkerson. We serve the great state of Georgia, and we routinely make videos to inform our fellow citizens of not just family law, divorce, child custody, legitimation, men's rights, but also criminal defense, and also topics that are important or that are circulating in the legal community. So this is going to be one of those topics today. Today we are discussing a very important phenomenon and one that has been studied and discussed in all academic circles across America, and that is the school to prison pipeline, okay? You may be familiar with the prison industrial complex, and so we'll talk a little bit about that today. Just a quick roadmap. So we'll discuss some of the elements of the school to prison pipeline, what to look for. This video is actually for parents, okay? And it's how to prevent your child from being essentially caught up in the inner machinations of the school to prison pipeline. Because sometimes once you're in it, it's very, very difficult to get released from it, okay? And so we'll discuss that here shortly. And so we have a great video for you installed today, and hopefully it's something that you enjoy. As always, if this is something that you do like, please think about liking and following us. And if it's something that some information that might be helpful, consider always sharing this video with a loved one or a friend. Let me just start with a quick disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only. By watching this video, it does not essentially constitute an attorney-client relationship. So that relationship does not exist between yourself and me as Genghis Shakhan, one of the managing attorneys at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law, nor yourself and the law firm of Shakhan and Wilkerson, okay? All right, disclaimer out the way. So let's go ahead and do a deep dive into this. And so we're going to talk a little bit about essentially not just the school to prison pipeline, but what it looks like up close and personal, okay? And how to keep your child from essentially getting ensnared in its machinery, as we discussed a bit earlier, okay? And so, just quickly imagine your child gets into a fight at school. What happens? It used to be, you might be disciplined by the school. It might be something like in-school suspension, depending on what age level the child is, depending on how egregious the fight was, and if there were injuries, the school would handle it internally. And so instead, or could be something like Saturday school, which I don't believe they do anymore. You may be able to tell I am a recovering educator, right? I used to be an educator. And so detention, I'm not sure if they do Saturday school detentions anymore. It was something that used to be done maybe a decade or so ago when I was in the schools. And so instead of the detention, Saturday school, in-school suspension, also known as ISS, or even out of school suspension, you find that your child might be in handcuffs, okay? And they might be sent to the juvenile justice system to be processed and processing. And so for many children, that is the new reality, okay? So any kind of school discipline, sometimes and many times, we're finding it is being outsourced to the juvenile courts, right? And oftentimes for many young people and students, this is going to be their first contact with law enforcement, and it can change the course and trajectory of their lives dramatically, okay? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, and what that school to prison pipeline looks like, what it looks like here in Georgia, and how parents can keep their kids out of the criminal justice system. So that is important, right? And so it's an important topic. So let's go ahead and start with really a definition of what the school to prison pipeline is and what it looks like. And so it refers to basically policies, practices, and circumstances that increase the likelihood that students, particularly those with repeated disciplinary issues or involvement with law enforcement, become involved in the juvenile or the criminal justice system. Okay. And so this is particularly for the demographic of students and school age young people and how their lives intersect with the juvenile justice system and law enforcement. So it is a pipeline. And so that's what we'll be discussing today. Okay. And so the idea is that for the school to prison pipeline, it starts with school discipline, and then somehow or other, law enforcement gets involved, the juvenile court gets involved, maybe probation gets involved, detention gets involved, or detention happens as a result. And then, of course, ultimately, after that contact, that initial contact with the juvenile justice system, they find themselves matriculating into the adult criminal justice system. Okay. And you have that pipeline. And so not everyone follows, not every child that has contact with the juvenile court takes that path. However, the statistics might be a little on the scary side once you kind of disaggregated all the data. Okay. And so repeated justice system involvement, especially at a young age, can absolutely have lasting consequences. Okay. And so you want to keep your child, especially if you believe your child to be at risk of getting involved or entangled with the justice system, juvenile justice system. You want to take every precaution that you can to make sure that that does not happen, or it's a pretty good, you can prognosticate the direction that that child's life is going to be kind of going in, moving forward. All right. And so that's essentially really, really important that you monitor that stuff at an early age. So sometimes small incidents, let's talk a little bit about how it starts. Incidents like fighting, threats, bullying, marijuana or vaping. We know that marijuana, of course, is a gateway drug. Alcohol, early use of alcohol, early exposure to it, weapons at school, social media threats, disruptive behavior, chronic absenteeism is a huge one that we used to see. Theft, vandalism. So some of those are some of the incidents that might lead to school discipline, and others might result in juvenile court or criminal charges. So juvenile court getting involved or criminal charges being filed. Okay. So just speak really briefly about Georgia schools and law enforcement. So many Georgia schools have what are called SROs, all right, on site, and those are school resource officers or campus police. Also, many schools have a zero tolerance policy for certain conduct. Okay, and so it's important to know that. And so some situations might lead to suspension, others might lead to expulsion from the school system, and then some might lead to juvenile complaints and then criminal charges. Again, some of this stuff you might be able to find in your student handbook. It might be a student handbook for the school, or it might be a student handbook for the actual school system. So parents need to understand what that discipline looks like, and when the juvenile court might get involved, and how that can incur proceedings, and how that might actually unfurl should your child be in trouble at school, given any kind of specific incident. So here are some of the risk factors. Children might be at greater risk. I talked about some of the at-risk children when they experience chronic truancy. Okay, and so I talked about absenteeism, but if the child is going to be truant, and that happens frequently, then you're more likely to have some interaction with law enforcement at an early age. Okay, frequent suspensions, repeated behavioral referrals, right? And so those behavioral referrals are generated by teachers, or it can be generated by school administrators when there are discipline issues inside the classrooms or inside the school. Untreated mental health concerns or substance use. So Early codependency in young people can be an issue, right? Unstable housing or family instability. Sometimes if families are transient, they're on the move, that can put your child at risk for certain conduct, academic struggles, or exposure to violence. Okay, and so these things are all going to be issues when it comes to at risk, making a situation where your child is at risk to have engagement with the juvenile justice system or law enforcement as it pertains to the school to prison pipeline. All right. So just important to note that any or all of these factors do not guarantee that they will enter the justice system, but they may increase vulnerability and signal the additional need of support. Okay. So you do want to just be mindful of that. Your child is vulnerable. And so, statistically, they might be in the crosshairs. So you do just want to be mindful of that and just create a situation where your child you can minimize exposure. Okay. So here are some warning signs that parents should not ignore, things you want to watch for. If Really the easiest is going to be the grades. Okay. And so that's one of the metrics that you can really measure of what's going on in the child's school life or academic life is what those grades look like. If they're dropping, if there's school avoidance, the child has, a low desire to go to school. If there's fighting, a lot of fighting that's happening at the school or at the bus stops, any kind of aggressive behavior, drug or alcohol use. Okay. That's usually a big sign, as well as any gang involvement or carrying of weapons. Gang involvement usually is a bad sign, right? And same with, carrying weapons, frequent disciplinary referrals, carrying weapons, getting involved in gangs, especially when it comes to the school. Sometimes they have these very strict policies. Is an easy way to be expelled from a school system. Okay, and it's challenging to live in a county in which your minor child is expelled from the system. Okay, and so it usually creates situations where your child is going to need to be educated virtually. Depending on what age they're in and what grade level they may be at. So you do want to monitor that stuff. Monitor their friend groups as well as their social media activity and any kind of social media conflict. And so don't want to ignore that, especially a lot of these beefs. It seems like they are fanned. These conflicts are fanned over the flames of social media. So you do want to monitor their social media presence. All right. Early intervention absolutely matters. So you do want to keep that in mind. So what happens in juvenile court? All right. I'll talk a little bit about juvenile court these past few minutes. Juvenile court is, essentially the major part in the school to prison pipeline. And so if your child enters into the juvenile court system, here are some possible outcomes. They might, if they haven't been in trouble before, there might be diversion programs available to them, counseling, community service, probation, things like restitution. Again, these depends on what kind of crimes that might have been alleged or violations that they may have been alleged to have done. Detention can be more serious, again, depending on how egregious the crimes or long-term supervision. Okay, so the focus usually of the juvenile justice system is rehabilitation. It's not like the adult system. Okay, but the court involvement can still be stressful and have a significant impact on your child's life and again their trajectory moving forward. And so, how the juvenile involvement can actually impact their future is something that does need to be discussed and something that needs to be studied a bit more. But repeated involvement may impact educational opportunities, college admission, and military eligibility. Okay, and so there are some crimes where the military, if you at a later date, you try to get your act together. The military just won't touch you with a 10-foot pole. Okay. And so those are things, you want your child to be either college ready or military ready, or you want to get ready to go into some kind of a trade You want to be careful, and there are certain kind of crimes that are going to might maybe even make you ineligible for student loans. Okay, and so you do want to just be mindful of that stuff. These early issues can absolutely impact the opportunities that might be available to your child at a later time and day. So same with professional licensing. Those future criminal cases, they can absolutely be devastating. So one poor decision can define your child's life, and your child's future. And that's really the biggest thing I'd like to impart to you today is these decisions reverberate through the decades when it comes to really, again, the direction your child's life might go in. So it's important that we jump on this stuff early and we address these repeated behaviors if they are manifesting as repeated behaviors before they get too far along the school pipeline and become essentially really matriculate into the adult system. So important to know. I know that there's a lot of emphasis on what schools can do, on what the government can be doing, and parents are the first line of defense always. Okay, and so a parent needs to know their child's friends. You need to know where they are at all times, what they're doing online. You want to know who they're communicating with, and you just want to stay involved. Okay, children need guidance, boundaries, and accountability. Okay, and all of that needs to happen early as opposed to later, right? And so involvement from both parents is always going to put your child statistically is going to put your child in a great position. When I mean both parents, don't necessarily mean that both parents need to live in the same home. However, both parents should be and can be actively involved in rearing that child. Both parents come with extra resources, extra people resources, and just essentially more eyes on when it comes to conduct and behavior. And one parent can always reinforce the other. Okay, and so that a team is going to always move further and essentially is going to be more successful than an individual, essentially 9 times out of 10. So you want to also build a relationship with the school. And so just to put a period on what I mentioned previously, co-parenting is important. Okay. And if you're not co-parenting or you can co-parent, getting those other family members and friends, creating a village around your child that can support your child in their academic success, so that they can avoid, coming in contact with the school to prison pipeline is going to be essential. All right, so you want to build relationships with the school. You don't want to wait, and this is what I see too many folks do. We get calls after your child has already, essentially been detained. They're already facing some serious charges. These behaviors and the conduct. There's a cycle of it. There's a pattern of it. So you want to address this stuff before it get too far along. My mother would say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that is absolutely the case. Okay, so you want to meet with teachers, counselors, administrators, and you want to stay in their hip pocket, essentially from K all the way through 12. You want to attend those parent conference meetings. And I know sometimes parents work 2 jobs, or you're working second shift or third shift. It's hard to get in there, but it's important that you get in there and you meet those parents and those teachers. They're going to assist you, and they're going to let you know kind of where your child is, not just academically, but as behaviorally as well. And then you want to respond promptly when the school does contact you. So a lot of times those teachers will reach out, and the school administrators will reach out. You want to make sure that you are available, and you want to make sure that you reach back out. Okay, and then at home you got to teach accountability. Okay, so that's something that happens at home. Not all education happens inside the schoolhouse. I believe it was Carter G. Woodson that says you get two educations, one that's given to you and one that you give yourself. Okay. In this instance, you want to teach that accountability part at home. Children should learn actions have consequences, respect for authority. They should also resolve conflict peacefully. They should be able to do that at home, telling the truth, accepting responsibility, and then, of course, think before acting is a huge one. Okay, I know that sometimes children, because of brain development, it's a little challenging to think before we act. A lot of adults have a problem with thinking before we act. So these are life skills, guys. This is not, something that you might find on the academic offerings, but these are life skills that can absolutely be taught at home, and they can reduce risky behaviors that are going to get your kid put, again, in the line of sight when it comes to being involved in this school to prison pipeline. So you want to limit these risky influences, and you got to monitor it. That social media is huge, guys. There is a lot of bad conduct that is on social media. A lot of risque behavior and content that is available to kids. Limit and minimize that cell phone use, internet activity, and of course their peer groups, which are really, really important to young people, and then late night activities. Very little positive is happening for young people very late in the evenings. Okay, so it's important that you monitor that as well. And then you want to just encourage positive activities. Children are, who are engaged often have fewer opportunities for misconduct. And so some examples are going to be things like sports, outreach programs, things like church, music, debate. A lot of schools here in Georgia have ROTC. You got the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, volunteer work, part-time jobs, and just mentorship programs. Okay, those are going to be great positive ways for your child to reach and meet mentors, adult mentors, and other mentors that might be in their age group to assist them in really, again, avoiding the school to prison pipeline. And then when your child does get in trouble, you do want to stay calm, don't panic. You don't immediately want to assume guilt or innocence, because it can go either way. Okay, you want to listen, you want to gather facts, and then of course, if your child is in the juvenile justice system, usually they will appoint a public defender. Of course, you can always retain your private attorney as well if you feel that the charges are serious enough. Okay, so children a lot of times don't fully understand their constitutional rights or the long-term consequences of speaking without legal representation. And so this is one of the reasons why, again, you got to stay really involved with the child to make sure that they don't put themselves in situations that are going to lead them to essentially mortgaging their future. Okay, you want to also watch for behavioral issues that might impact their at risk, certain at risk behaviors, anxiety, depression, ADHD, certain traumas or learning disabilities. Okay, you do want to watch out for. Okay, all right. And so, in wrapping things up, if you need an attorney, we're absolutely here for you. But the purpose of this video, this is not self-promotion video, but it is a video to really assist parents that might not have all the resources, but it's something to really contemplate and think about as you are really fighting to keep your child on the straight and narrow. And with time, of course, many school districts are pressed to essentially make budget cuts, and so some of those things like life skills that used to be available, there might have been school personnel that was available to assist with at-risk youth. It is more common in society to criminalize certain conduct that we see in schools, and so it is going to put you on a pathway to the school to prison pipeline, or your child on a pathway to getting, like I said, caught up in the school to prison pipeline. So you just want to make sure that you're monitoring these things, making certain that you're protecting and your child is aware of their constitutional rights, and that you are making certain that they are trying to give the juvenile justice system a wide berth, okay? So you don't want to get involved in that. And so here are some common myths that I do want to discuss with you really quickly. That juvenile justice proceedings are not serious, and that's not true, okay? So and again, some kids are bound over to the adult system, again, depending on how egregious the crimes they're alleged to have committed. And so you do want to, like I said, make certain that they are not as exposed to the justice system, and you want to, if there's a pattern of behavior which is landing them in court over and over again, that's going to be a problem. It might be a telltale sign that they are on a bad road. Okay. One other myth is that, hey, they're just kids. It used to be said that boys will be boys, but just make sure that your kids understand that their consequences have actions. Okay, especially when it comes to conduct that is now being criminalized in the school systems. Okay, it's important for them to know that. Or one arrest won't matter. It can matter, and again, depending on how egregious these acts are, it can land you in some pretty hot water. And so we just want to, again, as a final note, we want you to understand that your greatest investment is not your 401k. It's not your house. It's going to be your children, right? So you want to stay as involved as possible, ask questions, partner with those teachers in schools, get those mentors involved. You want to, of course, model good behavior. You want to and get that co-parent as involved as possible. Make sure you build a village and a tribe around your child. You're going to those school conferences. You're staying in the hip pocket of those teachers and school administrators, and you will see your child blossom under all of that wonderful and positive attention, and they will be primed to avoid the school to prison pipeline, and that's what we want to see. We want to see more young people that avoid the juvenile justice system, so they don't land in the adult justice system. Okay. All right. As always, thank you for watching. If this has been helpful for you, do think about liking and following us. And you can also share this with any other friends or family members that have young people and they have concerns about some of their at-risk conduct, or they just think that it's going to be helpful and educational. At the same time, if you do need a criminal defense attorney, you're welcome to give us a call at 404-999-9529 or 478-845-1213. Or you can go into the link in our bio and you can schedule your consultation there. And we'll be more than happy to speak with you. And if we can help you out, then we'd be more than happy to represent you as well. Okay. As always, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.